Welcome to another frightening episode of Movie Rio. I'm your host, Kevin.
I'm Samantha
I'm Kevin
Tomlinson.
Tracy.
Wait.
Yeah, I didn't say my name. Dramatic pause. All right.
Oh,
It's all right. Yeah, I'm Kevin Tracy. This is Samantha Tomlinson, and welcome to another.
if you're still confused, listen to any of our other episodes where we get our names correct.
Yes, this is just I'm completely frazzled after watching this movie. This movie is just so balls to the wall, insane, and funny. I guess there's no way to talk about it except for jumping right into it. This week we're doing What We Do in the Shadows, continuing our vampire Halloween month montage. I'd seen this movie before a couple years ago, and I kind of forgot just how off the cuff funny this movie was. Was this your first time watching this one, Sam?
Yeah, so
Uh,
you
okay.
raved about this, I remember a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
this is one of those movies I feel like it's on Amazon. Now it's not. Now it is. Now it isn't. So I never got a chance to watch it, but I wanted to watch it, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to rent it for no reason. So basically, I was like, when you said you wanted to do vampires, I'm like, I assume that means we're doing What We Do in the Shadows, which I'm totally fine with because I had been wanting to watch it. And this is a pretty, it's like an hour and a half. Like, it's a pretty short movie. Um, and it's got a pretty great cast. And I gotta say it managed. I knew like a little bit, I knew like the gist of the movie, and I
Yeah.
think it kind of it it was what I thought it was going to be, but also it wasn't. Like there were more things that the characters were dealing with that I wasn't expecting, or
Yeah,
events that happened that I wasn't
yeah,
expecting.
yeah, this movie it very much has like that dry office style humor, which I think is pretty funny, but it does it in a way that, oh, like they're vampires, so they're gonna be in like this really unlikely situation where us normal people are gonna find ourselves in, and they go all in. And it's like, oh yeah, we can't see ourselves in reflections, so we don't know what we look like, so we just draw each other's to know what we look like. And it's just really funny because they don't know how to draw, so they're just really crappy stick doodles just of them wearing like different coats. And it's just they look so bad, but it's like they take that to heart. It's like, oh no, this isn't for me. And this was also kind of like my first real introduction to Taika Waititi, because
Yeah.
he directed, he wrote, and he starred in it, along with Jermaine Clements, who also directed, wrote, and starred in it, as two of the main stars, which is
Two of the
Viago
three
and
vampires.
Vlad.
Well, I guess
Yeah. There's
technically four,
well,
or no,
yeah,
five.
technically four.
Actually five, really. But yeah,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
the main three, the core ones.
Yeah, yeah. So the main two that I mentioned are like, writers directors. That's Taika Waititi, who plays Viago in this, and Jermaine Clement, who plays Vladislav the Poker. um, and I
When he
also
said
thought it was
that,
kind of,
and then
yeah,
his eyebrows raised, like, you get it, and it's like, my god.
yeah.
um, I
I
yeah,
also, yeah, I really liked that each of like the vampire like roommates each kind of was like a different generation
yes,
or like gap of like it's like, oh, this guy's from like the 1300s, this guy's from like the 1800s, and like this guy's from like 1940s Germany. It's like he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I was a Nazi. It's like, okay, we're just gonna gloss over that
It
apparently.
says if when the war
um
ended, if you were a Nazi, if you were a vampire,
yeah,
oh, and if you were a vampire Nazi, oh, like forget about like it's like what
yeah,
like
like that was so
um
funny. But I
yeah
also like that each vampire was like styled after like each of like the popular like main vampires. Like Peter, like straight up looked like
yes,
Nosferatu. Vlad was kind of like based off of Vlad the Impaler. Deacon was kind of more like uh
a little more of a
kind of like
cliche. I
inner
feel like him and what is it, Vladis?
uh
What's his name? No,
Viago.
Viago, and what was the Vlad is I. It wasn't like Vladimir. It was like Vladis. What's the other vampire's name?
Yeah, yeah,
Vladislav.
Vladislav.
Okay, they I felt like
Yeah,
were a little bit aside from Peter, yeah, who looked pretty much like Nosferatu. They were looked like more cliche vampires. And I just want to also
yeah.
explain, if you haven't seen this movie, um, basically it's basically three vampires, or four technically, I guess, including Peter, who are roommates in modern day, but they're
And
still dressed like they're whatever decade they were born in. So like Iago's like, it said he's like almost 400 years old, but he's dressed kind I don't know fashion that well, but
no, 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 like Viago said he was like from like he's like an 1800s like dandy
it
or
said
something
he
like
was like
that.
370. Maybe okay.
I think
I
you're
know
mixing it
Deacon's the
up.
youngest.
He's the young
Deacon's the
he's the
youngest.
he yeah no
No,
Viago's the
No,
youngest.
Deacon.
Right,
Deacon
yeah,
was
yeah,
like a
Deacon's the
hundred and
youngest.
something. Peter's like eight
Yeah.
thousand years old. I think I'm mixing up. I'm definitely mixing up Viago and uh Vladislav. But like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I did think it was really funny that they were
they're
kind
not even
of
attempting to blend in.
stylized
Like,
as like well, yeah, and like I just thought, well, I also thought it was really funny that they're all kind of like based off of like very famous like
yes,
periods of vampires, and like even like when Nick eventually shows up, like he's basically like they basically have him to be kind of like Twilight because he's like more traditionally and modernly handsome compared to the rest of them. It's just like, oh, like this guy is straight up, and he even says like, oh yeah, like
yeah,
I'm
I
the
was
dude from
waiting
Twilight.
the
Like
whole
he's
movie for him to make that
saying
joke.
that to like pick up chicks or
I
something
was
like that.
waiting that whole movie for
I
them
it's
to
just
make that joke, because this is 2014, so not that old. So like,
uh
and so I was just like
yeah.
waiting. Like, are they gonna make like a Twilight joke? And then they did. I was
I,
like,
yeah, like honestly, I feel like it's just kind of like you're contractually obligated to make a Twilight joke in a
they even did
vampire
that in like Hotel
comedy at
Transylvania.
any
I think
point.
they
Yeah.
made like a Twilight joke, and they're like, really?
Y- Oh
Yeah.
yeah, they did. Like yeah, it was like towards the end of the movie, but yeah, I do vaguely remember a Twilight joke here and there, um, which I feel like kind of dates the movie a little bit, but not by
No,
much considering how big of a thing that
no,
that
it's
Twilight
not a
was.
horrible like reference. It's
Oh no, like I mean, it kind of narrows it down to the decade, but it's not it's not as bad as like, oh, if they like dabbed in the movies, like, okay, so this was made
yeah.
like yesterday. um, so well, let's just kind of like jump into this. So we kind of talked a little bit about the characters. Which one did you think you kind of
Oh,
gravitated towards? For
yeah,
me,
for
it was
sure.
definitely
So
Viago with
Taika,
Taika Waititi.
he was
He was
hilarious, and he was
hilarious.
also kind of adorable and endearing compared to the others. Um, he explains that so as a vampire, he came to New Zealand because it's all set in New Zealand. Um, I don't remember how long ago, but he came X amount of years ago because he was like following the woman he loved, but his there was a mishap, and his servant at the time put the wrong postage on his coffin, and it took him 18 months, and by the time he got there, she was already married. And I'm like, that's so sad. And then he's like, I mean, I wanted to kill her husband, but I knew, like, she was happy, so I just had to let her go. I'm like, oh my god. And we spend the rest of the movie. So there's a part in the movie where so Nick, who is, we'll get into Nick in a minute, but Nick becomes a vampire and kind of joins the group for a minute, and his friend Stu is hooking them all
Yeah,
up. I don't want to get too into it really quick,
Stu.
but he hooks them all up with like technology and trying to make them more modern. And and Viago video chats with his servant, and he says like, oh yeah, you put the wrong postage, so it took me a really long time to get here. And his servant was basically upset because he's like, I'm 90 right now, you were supposed to turn me, now I'm too old for you to turn me. And and then
It's
and
like I
then
wasted my
there's a
life.
couple of scenes in the movie where we see Viago standing or flying, I guess, outside of an apartment building, and there's an old person inside.
Like
And the first time, I think the first or second time, I didn't realize it's. I don't remember what was it. Catherine was her name. Katrina. It was something with a
like
K, but
Katrina or something.
it he's.
Yeah.
I want to say it's Catherine, but anyway, regardless, it doesn't really matter.
One of the
He
yeah. Regardless,
is
it doesn't
standing
matter.
outside her apartment because he like still loves her and stuff, and it's sad, but I didn't realize that. I thought it was the servant for like it was just because it was from far away. It didn't like peer into because it's shot like a doc. It's like a mockumentary. It's like a documentary. They explain
Oh,
it's a
100%. Yeah.
documentary. A couple of documentarians got permission. They won't be harmed by any of them to document what they do, like what a day to day life is like for a vampire in New Zealand.
Yeah, like yeah, because it's very much in like the style of like like The Office or Parks and Rec or something like that. It's a documentary film crew that's going around filming the dark corner of these mysterious creatures in their modern life, and it's just these four kind of they're kind of idiots sometimes trying to navigate modern day with everything that's going on because eh, when we see them, like the only person who kind of seems relatively, um, I guess, adapted to modern day is Deacon because he has a familiar, like he has like a human servant who goes by the
Jackie, yeah.
who's Jackie, who's basically just a suburban mom who's like, oh yeah, he's gonna like turn me into a vampire as long as I do what he says, and it's like seems like a good deal. It's like, yeah, I kind of gotta bring people over here to kill him, which is kind of a bummer, but immortality, so
Which
it kind of weighs
can we
out.
talk about for the second?
Just her reasoning
We gotta
behind
talk about
that
that
is
for a
just
second. We
really
meet
funny.
her, and yeah, she's doing all this because she wants him to turn her into a vampire. But we don't find out till like more than halfway through the movie when or I don't know, maybe it's halfway. Again, it's like a short movie, but we find out later that when she gets upset because Nick got turned to a vampire, so she's been bumped from the list, and we find out she's married
Yeah.
with kids, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, and I mean, it doesn't get being a documentary. It doesn't style movie. It doesn't really go into the detail of what's wrong with her life that she wants to escape and become a vampire. But I was like, are you? I was like, what? And then at the very randomly at the end, we find out, oh, I'm a vampire now, guys. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Nick turned her into a vampire, and then she made her husband her familiar to like do. It's like I love you, and we're partners, but I'm in charge now.
Oh,
It's like
wait, is that at the?
okay.
Because we find out she's a vampire at the party.
Yeah, like at the very end, like I think like either right before the credits or like during the credits, there's like some like random like a couple
Okay,
like
I
mid
didn't see
credit
that then.
scenes and stuff like that. I believe. Okay, it's like Sam, has Marvel taught you nothing? You gotta sit through all the credits.
Sorry.
Oh, this is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for
I
you.
failed. I
Um,
won't. I won't fail again.
but I feel like fucking Darth Vader when you say shit like that. It's like I won't fail you, Master. It's like all right. So I, another one of my favorite characters of this was Stu.
Stu.
You kind of mentioned him a little bit. He's like Nick's best friend, and Nick who just like randomly was like invited to like the dinner party by Jackie so he could be like a meal for the rest of them, and they ate like the girl that he was with, and it's like instead they like Peter, who's like the old like Nosferatu looking vampire who lives in a stone sarcophagus in the basement. He ended up turning Nick into a vampire. So he just brings his friend Stu over, who doesn't fully realize that he's a vampire, um, and just tries to is like, yeah, like I mean he's my mate. Like I don't want to eat him, but it's kind of tempting. But I know that he's it's like his reasoning for not turning him into a vampire is hilarious. Is because he's a vegan, and it's like I don't want to bum him out by making him drink blood and eat meat and all that. It's like he'd be really bummed out about that. I just thought that was hilarious that his entire reasoning for not eating his best friend, not because it's wrong, but because he'd be really bummed out because he'd have to kill stuff. It's like, you know what? At least he's
Yeah, we
watching out
gotta
for his
talk
friend.
at that dinner party.
and
So,
and
prior to the dinner party,
yes,
Deacon tells Jackie like, "Hey, like bring us people so we can eat them," and and sweet
not
virgins
just people,
because they
specifically
take. He's like,
virgins.
I think it was Vlad. Yeah, let's say Vlad. Vlad basically
Vlad.
says, oh, oh God, it was something like, think about.
It's like we don't necessarily. It's like we don't necessarily need to eat virgins. We just
No,
think it
I
sounds
think
cool.
one
Because
of
I
them
mean,
said that, and one of them
it's
said
like,
something about it's just like you when you eat your food, you it's nice to know that it hasn't been fucked. I'm like, wait, well, people
yeah, it's like you'd like it a little bit better
like
if you knew
that makes
someone
sense in the
hadn't fucked it.
context of a virgin, but the idea of like who ideally you wouldn't want to eat food. Yeah, yes, I actually yeah. Ideally, you don't want to eat food that someone has fucked. Sanitary. Um, but
This is true.
but
For sanity. Yes, because that's a common
no,
problem.
I said
People are constantly
no.
fucking
I said
sandwiches. That's why I no
sanitary.
longer eat at Subway.
Oh, okay. It
Yes,
was the
that's
only
why I
part
no
of the
longer
sentence
eat at
I
Subway.
thought I said sandwiches instead of sanitary. Um. Anyway, uh, so they're trying to basically ask like it was Nick and was it Josephine? I want to say was her name the girl
Oh, I think Josephine,
who
the
Jackie
random
invited
dinner
because I
guest
guess
that
she
they
was
ate.
some girl that she went to school with who was mean to her or something. And she's just
Some super petty reason, which
and
I
they're
kind of
basically
thought was
asking
really
them like,
funny.
are they virgins? And they're like, what? No. And then they're giving them dinner, which is just like it's like Chef Boyardee, and
What? Yeah,
and they're
it's
trying
like
to
canned
pull a
pasta or
Lost Boys,
something.
and they're like, you're eating worms, and they're like, no. They're like, oh, like I love how okay they can't
Yeah. Oh, and then Deacon's like, you have your dick is a snake. It's like, oh, and then Mick's freaking out. It's like, oh no, there's
um
a cobra in my pants.
then um Nick eventually is trying to leave and he sees Jackie outside in her car. She's like, "Oh, bye," and just leaving. He's like, "What the hell?" Because he thinks he's in a house full of these weirdos. He doesn't know they're vampires. And then he sees like which I want to talk about this other scene in a second. But Viago, Josephine is dead, and he's water fountaining her blood because he bit the artery,
Oh yeah.
which is
Yeah,
one of
and it's just
my
spurting
favorite scenes in the
everywhere.
movie. Which I'll talk about in a second. But uh, and so he's freaking out, like, "Oh my god, they're trying to kill me!" And of course, we don't ever see. And I'm assuming this movie had a pretty small budget, but it's one of those things of it's not like
It I feel like it kind of added the
no,
charm with its
I
small
agree. I
budget.
totally agree because it's like it's we're not seeing there's not one scene of them like running really fast or anything, which is I feel like something I've seen in most vampire movies. So I mostly thought it was like okay, they're not doing that because that would be too expensive. But it was just funny
Yeah.
because Nick is just they're just appearing everywhere and Viago especially is just right behind him and then he turns in a hallway and Viago comes out the
He's
other way.
yeah, and then he crawls out of his backpack that Nick
Or
is
Deacon.
or that Nick is
Deacon does,
wearing.
yeah.
Yeah, Deacon does.
Um, yeah.
That was so
But then
funny.
he gets out of the
And I
house
love that.
and
Oh, but
uh,
hold on. Before that, I also love that when he's running down the hallway, he runs into Vlad, and they explain that like Vlad was like extremely powerful, like shape shifting. But then after his defeat with the Beast, his powers have greatly diminished. So now whenever he turns into animals, he can't quite get the face right. So Nick runs into a hallway and he encounters a cat with Vlad's face on it, and it's the most unsettling thing I have ever seen. And it's just so creepy and so funny at the same time because they're playing some like really crazy like tambourine like music to like I don't know how to describe the music for that scene, but it's just so insanely chaotic, but wildly like whimsical and funny at the same time. It's so great.
Um, well, the first time I think no, I'm thinking. Oh no, sorry, that wasn't him. That was Deacon that said in the very so the very first scene, like the opening scene, Viago wakes up out of and comes out of his coffin. But it's I love how based on the way they're moving, anytime they're flying or floating or something, um, it's very clear that they're probably attached to wires, and you can't see it. Like it's quality enough that you don't see it,
Oh
but
yeah.
based on the way they're moving, it's clear that they are, and it's which again I agree. I feel like it adds to the humor and the charm of the movie. But Viago's rising, or Taiko T's just rising, just the way he's moving and the look on his face, like I don't know, he was going so slow with it, but he's knocking on everybody's door because he wants to have a flat meeting, and Deacon is just living. His room's just like a closet, and he's hanging upside down, and he's like,
Yeah,
how was your night last night?" He's like, not great. I
it's like I turned into a dog and I had
and then
sex or something like
yeah,
that.
because
It's
it's
like, oh, that's
cool.
cool.
And yeah,
It's like, anyway, we're having a flat meeting in 20 minutes. Like, will you be there? It's like, yeah. It's like, do you want me to shut the door? It's like, yeah. It's like he's basically being like a house mother
yeah.
to everyone.
And then I think the meeting is it's again. This is all right. This is like before the title, which I forgot about because it the movie it was like I want to say 15 minutes before we got the title. But
Yeah. Like this is probably like the best like they could have
oh
gotten
yes,
for an opening scene. It's just such it's uncomfortable enough but like accurate enough for like roommate meetings. Like if you ever had a roommate meeting, like this is 100% like how it goes of just like, "Hey, like I know you haven't like done your dishes in a while and they're kind of piling up. Do you mind getting on that?" It's like, "Oh, I'll get on." Like, "No, we have a chore wheel for a reason." And they're just they go back and forth on this. Like, we're vampires. Like, we don't do this. Like, maybe we should get some slaves because, like, they're all old fashions. Like, it's like, no, we can't do that anymore. It's like,
but
oh,
I
this is
think
lame.
they're complaining that Deacon hasn't done his he's not doing his fair share. He's like, you haven't done dishes in 5 years. He's like, why do we have all these and he's like saying complaining about the bloody plates that are everywhere, and then it cuts to the kitchen and all the plates are just covered in blood.
Yeah, it's like,
And I guess they
it's
have
so
like a
great.
chore wheel on the wall, and Biago's just like, Deacon, yours dishes has it's been on dishes for you for like five for 5 years. And it was just it's funny because it's I mean this could have been it wouldn't be the same though, but it could have been like a group of vampires who are trying to like same like they blend into society, but these are no they're all cliche vampires from various eras still dressing in their accord according they're the proper decade. I can't talk. and and are
Yeah.
still struggling with
We're really just
and
like flubbing
still
this one up.
struggling to like guys, we all have to can we at least put down newspapers before we kill someone to not make a mess? And that's one of my other favorite scenes is when Viago has brought a woman back to the house, and he's just like asking her like questions, and she's like, "So you're in school?" And she's like, "Yeah, but I'm gonna travel." And as she's talking, he's just placing down newspapers,
Yeah, it's like,
and
that
then
should be a red flag, lady.
bites her neck and hits the artery, so blood's shooting everywhere, and he panicking just like it's like water
It's like,
fountaining
oh
it, like
shit.
like with a water but like he's just like holding his mouth like right so he can like catch it, and then she's like dead on the floor in the pile of newspapers, and the whole room is like a mess, and he's just sitting there so ashamed of himself. But it made me think.
Yeah, and then then he turns to the camera. It's like, aside from the artery, it's like I think she really had a good time. It's
But I gotta
like,
say,
oh
when I
my
saw her
gosh.
dead on the ground in a pile of like bloody newspapers, it made me think of that short we did in college where the the whole like plot was, hey guys, maybe we should do a holiday video, and the whole story is us arguing
Oh
over what we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
do, and
yeah.
it ends with like a full out like war and fight zone, and I'm like on the ground looking like I'm dead, and it's
Oh,
just ketchup, which apparently you
ketchup.
shot
Yeah.
me
Oh
with.
my god, that was such a cringy video. That's
I
such a
mean, it was
cringy
fun to
video.
make.
Like looking back on it now, it's like it's kind of funny. Like after filming it, but like watching it, it's like, oh, this is kind of cringy. It's like, oh, I
But
don't want to have this in
I think
my
we
my
all like
feed.
jokingly, I don't know, we came up with that idea of somebody like being on the floor dead and bloodied or something, and I'm like, oh, who's that gonna be? And it seems like everyone in the room looked at me.
It's like, yeah, like it wasn't even a vote. It was just kind of like it's like Sam's like it's like,
I know
what
there
are you
was no
talking about?
discussion. Just no. Do you want to do it? Everyone just like stopped talking and just looked at me. Like obviously it's gonna be you.
It's like we
Um,
have our volunteer.
but there's another. I will say the humor in this movie. It's a lot of it is very like I said. I talk about like they're talking about like oh my god oh there's so many bloody plates and there's actual bloody plates. The humor in this is really literal,
Yeah.
which is great. Like I think there's there's another joke. I can't. Damn it! I was thinking about this right before, but there's like a couple of these just incredibly like they say something and that's exactly what it is. Oh my god, this is gonna
What
bug
it
me now.
is.
I think there's another one towards the end.
I I just love how quotable this movie is. Like at one point they encounter a group of werewolves after they've gone
We're
and died
werewolves, not
partying, and
swearwolves.
it's like, oh, what, yeah, we're werewolves, not swearwolves. It's like, oh, can't you? It's like, turn your cameras off. Can't you see our friend just died in an unfortunate sunlight accident? And just like, it's just insane enough of a movie that just like I kind of just want to like get like a bunch of like t-shirts of like all like the stuff that they quote. And like after like looking up this movie because I wanted to try and like buy it off like Amazon or something, there was just like a bunch of like merch of like t-shirts and stuff like that of just like some like the random like things they said, like we're werewolves not werewolves. And also like there's a FX show of that's the same show, What We Do in the Shadows. It's like a different group of vampires, but after watching this and like a couple clips on YouTube, a couple clips from the show ended up on my feed, and apparently one of them in one of the episodes, uh, Taika Waititi, Vlad Clements, and the guy who plays Deacon, John, like Johnny
Yeah,
Brooke. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. They're in the episode along with Tilda Swinton, and it's like, oh, we're the Council of Vampires, and they're introducing themselves like as their characters from the movie. It's like that's hilarious. It's like, and then they're mentioning like other like famous like actors or people playing like different vampires from movies. Like they have Wesley Snipes, like actually Wesley Snipes on Skype there in the episode because he's Blade the Vampire Hunter, and it's like, oh, like he's a, like they're saying it's like, oh yeah, like he's a half vampire. It's like, wait, are you serious? Like Wesley Snipes played himself in a movie, and there's like, oh, there's like we needed Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt because they were in an Interview with a Vampire, and apparently they're real vampires, and we needed Pattinson from Twilight. And it's like, oh yeah, no, he's trying to distance himself from it. It's like it was so funny, and their delivery for it was just so dry that there's like what they were saying wasn't jokes. It was just actual
yeah.
conversations that they were having, and it's so great, and I love the humor. Like Taika Waititi is just so
He's yes,
insanely funny.
he's so
I
talented.
love, yeah. He's a
He's
treasure. He's a
a
treasure
really
in
great
this.
writer and a really great director. I was thinking about this. He won. He he won the Oscar for Jojo Rabbit for was it I don't know best original or best adapted I don't remember, but he won for Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, that was
I'm
that's a
pretty sure he
yeah
was
yeah that's a
I'm
great movie.
assuming he was nominated for directing. I don't remember if he won or not, but he's also one of the directors for Mandalorian. And he's the voice of the voice of the
Yes,
droid and the yes Krorg, but also
Korg.
in Mandalorian he's the voice of one of the droids. But yes, actually that was the thing. My sister, it was like a while ago.
Yeah. He
She
was
asked me,
Korg and
she's
he
like, "Did
directed
you know?"
Ragnarok.
So that was the thing is, I didn't know Taika Waititi. I had never seen this movie. I didn't know who he was before Ragnarok. That was the first time I heard his name, or I like his name suddenly started coming up, or I was seeing it like
Yeah.
because it was saying like from the mind of Taika Waititi, whatever, in the trailer. And so my sister said to me, "Did you know Taika Waititi directed Thor Ragnarok?" Like genuinely, like she just found out and thought it was like a fun fact and was asking me like, "Did you know that?" And I'm like, yeah, like a little douche, just because I genuinely thought that was common knowledge. Because to me, that's where how I became aware of him. Jojo Rabbit is what put him on the map and made him like a household name, I would say. But I feel like,
Yeah.
but Ragnarok
No,
or
I,
maybe
I
even
I
this is
agree.
kind of like I don't know. I think that's just like it was one of those like if you know him, he's like famous for the people that know him already. And
Like if
I
you
wasn't
yeah.
trying to be an asshole. I
Yeah.
genuinely thought everybody knew that. And she's like, I'm like, yeah, that's what he's no. That's why. That's like one of the things that made him famous. What he's known for. She's like, I thought he was known for What We Do in the Shadows. And I'm thinking, you know what? That's fair. I was being an asshole. She was just doing it right back to me. But, like, I genuinely thought that was common knowledge because I never heard of him before Ragnarok, and then he did Jojo Rabbit and just became like a rock star. Like he's so talented and
Yeah,
oh
and
my
and
god.
and now I and th- yeah, and then now he's in this is still in theaters, I believe.
Have you
Free
seen it?
Guy with Ryan Reynolds. He's like one of the I want to. I've not yet. I haven't had a chance to. I believe he's like the main antagonist
Mm-hmm.
of the movie from what I know. I don't know if he had like a major like directing role, but I do know that he is one of the stars of it. He's been kind of frontlined in that a lot. And it was really funny. I remember seeing like an interview with Ryan Reynolds, Taika Waititi, and like a couple other stars of the movie, and they was like, "Oh yeah, no, like it's really cool, like working with like Ryan Reynolds. It's I've kind of like admired him from afar, and like Ryan Reynolds is saying the same thing about Taika Waititi, and the other two is like, wait, haven't you guys like worked together? It's like, no, never worked before in my life. And like, there's like, yeah, no, like, didn't you guys do Green Lantern together? It's like, no, I've never heard of that movie. It's like they're both like not acknowledging that Green
They
Lantern
were in
existed. Like
Green
they were both on
Lantern.
the
He
same
was in Green
page.
Lantern.
I thought that was he wasn't in it. I think he was like one
Oh,
of like
okay.
the writers or something. I don't know how he was attached to it, but they have worked together, um, in a official capacity, and I just thought that was really funny that like both of them don't want to acknowledge that
Um,
movie's
but like
existence.
there's supposedly I haven't heard. I don't think I've heard anything of it since like it was announced. But supposedly, there's supposed to be like a Star Wars movie, like a story directed by Taika, and I'm like, holy shit, that's gonna be so great if that ever happens. But yeah, he's.
Yeah. I feel like we're
I
spending most
I
of
mean,
this just
I
talking about
don't.
Taika
Here's the thing:
Waititi, not the movie.
Jermaine Clement, like he pops up in things every once in a while. Like I'm a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
familiar with him, like but my like roommates are
yeah. I remember he's like
yes.
the
See,
crab
yeah,
in Moana,
yeah.
the
So, but I guess
shiny.
he's in this like it's kind of like a Lonely Island type group, but like with one other.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
and my roommates are like
Flight of the
really into him,
Conchords.
and that's like I'm kind of I know his name and I know some stuff he's been in, but like I think Taika I'm a little more familiar with and a little bit more of a fan of just because I know him more. Um, but he is, but Jermaine
Yeah,
Clement's
that's fair.
very talented also and really funny in this movie, and but Taika he just stole the show like
Yeah,
because he was so like yeah, he said they call him what he's like the 1800s dandy. He's just so like he's almost like yeah, he's like the mother,
yeah,
but also kind of like a child. Not really he's immature. He's just so like sweet and innocent, but he's still a vampire and happily kills people. And
yeah. Like like he's like naive enough to kind of get away with it to the point where it's like, oh, like he doesn't know any better, even though it's like, oh, he 100% knows better. He's just going with it. It's just I think that another thing of this movie is just like the running
mm-hmm.
joke of the beast that like Vladislav, like they mentioned this like multiple times, like from like the very beginning of the movie and like the build up at the end. Like I was watching this last week with my girlfriend. She had never seen this movie before, so it was really kind of funny watching her reaction to the beast. And the whole thing, it builds up that it's like, oh yeah, like this beast, it like there was a huge epic fight, and it's like, oh, I fought the beast on the side of a cliff, I fought the beast in a swamp. And like all the roommates are saying is like, oh yeah, like says this like all the times. Like I remember one time he told us like he fought them there, he fought the beast there, and just it's such like an over exaggerated story. It's like, okay, like what is the beast? And we later find out that this huge party that they're going to, it was like the Black Ball or something,
it's
like the
specifically a party
Masquerade or
for
something. I forgot what it's called.
vampires and werewolves and banshees. It's just there's a
Like
very high many supernatural creatures in New
like
Zealand, Wellington, New Zealand. That's what
supernatural,
it
yeah,
said.
like a supernatural community. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we later find out that they get an invite, and the guest of honor is the Beast, and they won't say the actual person's name. But when they go there, they go there with the documentary crew, and it's like Taiko's like, oh, there she is, there's the Beast, and it's like some like relatively like attractive woman. It's like okay, like what's going on? It's like, yeah, that's Vladislav's ex. Like, oh my gosh, that's it. They just had a really bad breakup, and he just calls her the Beast because of it. I thought that was a hilarious giveaway. Like that was the punchline. It's just like, oh, I was like, she's a bitch. Like she's a beast. I don't want to talk about her. And like my girlfriend's reaction to that, she was crying. She was laughing so hard at that reveal. It was so not what we were expecting, because like I had to pause the movie and like I was like,
Yeah,
what were you expecting?
we're
It's like, I don't
yeah.
know, the devil. Like because every time they say the beast, they go to like some like weird like Victorian like biblical like painting of like some weird looking animal that kind of
It's
looks like
teasing
a
it up to be
demon or
like
like the
a
devil or
monster
something.
the whole
And
time. And at
yeah,
first, I thought
yeah,
when he got the invitation, and I love how they open the invitation and they're like, "Oh, it looks like they burnt the edges." It really like adds a nice touch to it to make it like an old timey
yeah,
scroll
they're
that you
yeah,
would get that would make sense for a vampire in a vampire like environment, but the fact that it's modern day, so they clearly made the paper look old and burnt. like um but they're reading the
yeah.
invitation,
It's
and
so great.
Vlad really hopes to one day be the guest of honor, and then it turns out but at first his reaction, so it's the beast, but I thought because they just had kicked Nick out of the house for a very valid reason, which we'll talk about in a second, but I thought that Nick was going to be the guest of
Yeah,
honor, and then I realized, wait, Vlad wouldn't be this upset about it. Deacon would be, because him and Nick were always going at it. And then no, it's the Beast, his ex girlfriend. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Just but what did you think of the
I'm
beast's
with Sam. I thought
reveal?
it was going to be just like a monster or something. Like I didn't think it was going to be a person.
Yeah. By the way, just for
Yeah.
those of you who don't know, my girlfriend's name is also Sam, hence the confusion. She's not referring to herself in the third person here, folks. I'm with Kevin on this one. Thanks,
Yeah, I'm
Kevin.
OC Sam. Just keep it that put it that way. That's what your roommates started calling
Oh
me
my
because
god.
for the sake of confusion.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Um, so yeah, we got to talk. So Nick joins. So Peter is the one that turns him into a vampire, but later Deacon says to Jackie that he turned, and maybe he just meant they turned him, like they're all to blame for him being turned.
like they're all kind of like no, like they're he pretty much like talks to her like, oh yeah, like we're all kind of like cool with like him being like a vampire and like hanging out with us, and because he pretty much says like he had like no intention of like ever turning Jackie into a familiar, like for the most part. He's just using her as like basically a servant, which is a dick thing to
So
do, but he's a
so a
vampire, so I'm
familiar
gonna let it
is
slide.
when
Um
so a familiar turning someone into a familiar is turning them into a vampire, and then Wait, what's okay? I was getting mixed up on the terms, and
No, like like a familiar is basically just like a vampire servant under the promise that they'll like do something in return,
but
mostly just turning
so
them
she
into like
is,
a vampire,
but so she
which
is
he
his
he
familiar.
never.
Okay,
Yes, but he has no but he has
okay. I think
zero intention of
meant to
ever
say
turning her into a
vampire, but you said
vampire.
familiar, and then that got me all confused. Okay, um, so but
Oh yeah,
they
oh
yeah. So
sorry.
Nick gets turned, and then joins, kind of just joins the group, and they he basically they go well they love Stu, his friend Stu, and then get scenes of them like one of my
Yeah, I love the
one of
fact
my
that they
favorite
all just
yeah
like,
they
oh
all
yeah,
love Stu.
Stu's
They're hugging
great.
him when they see him
They
like
all
Nick, but
yeah.
Stu.
I, yeah, I thought that was that was like the most wholesome thing in this movie is that they all like love Stu to the point where it's like no, like even Peter, who's basically just like almost like a feral vampire,
But
is like, oh yeah, like I'm not gonna mess with him. Stu's
he's
great.
like giving him like setting him up with phones, and I love how Deacon freaks out because he gets a text from Viago saying there's a crucifix behind you, and it just cuts to Viago just like just like laughing at his prank. It's so
Yeah. Oh yeah, or they watch a YouTube video of a
yeah.
sunrise, like oh shit,
Um, but
and they're all
Nick
freaking
every
out.
time. So they in the beginning of the movie because they go out because they're trying to find people to kill, and they can't be invited in. They have to be invited in, and so none of the bouncers will let them in. And I love the joke because they're going to different bars and they're like, "Can you let us in?" They're like, "No," like because the bouncer decides who goes in. But I have to say, it's a bar. Like regardless whether the bouncer lets you in or not, like unless I feel like isn't it just a home that you can't enter? That a vampire can't enter?
I think it's I think the rules are if it's a building that
Oh,
someone
okay, okay.
owns,
But
you
they're
need to
like
have permission to
struggling
be
to
let
get
in.
in, and then they finally get into this little crappy dive bar. But then
Yeah, yeah, and they're hyping it up. It's like, oh yeah, this is the most happening vampire bar in all of New Zealand, and it's just like maybe three people there. It's just kind of like a ratty carpet that like Viaga's like dancing on. It's just like it looks like a depressing like former like party city that someone
that's so
hastily converted
specific.
into like a restaurant at the last minute. It like
um, but then
it's so
eventually,
specific, but it's so
when they're with
accurate.
when Nick joins, they he knows the bouncer, or his friend knows the bouncer at what's it called, Boogie Wonderland or something.
So yeah, some really kind of
And
like
they yeah
cheesy kind of like nightclub, but it's just like they'd never been able to
they
get
get
in
in,
before. So it's like,
and
yeah, well, like let's do this.
uh Nick is telling everybody, very casually telling everybody, that he's a vampire, and they're like, "No, you can't just tell people that you're a vampire." And I mean, I kind of assumed, oh, what? No one's believing him. It's fine. And then he tells someone he's a vampire, and the guy's like, "Yeah, and I'm a vampire hunter." And he's like, "Yeah, cool." And then they just leave. And then later in the movie, there's basically they find in the basement where Peter is on fire, and he's on fire because a the hunter yeah broke
The
in,
window got
and it's
busted in.
daylight, and they can't go in to help Peter because then they'll all burn. It's kind of this like where we can't help it. It's sad, and then
Yeah,
Deacon kind of, it's like he's being like a cop. He's like, so we think what happened was he entered through here, and then he came down, and
but I thought it was really I thought it was really funny when like they're like examining the vampire hunter. They're like see a crucifix and they're like hissing like and like Vaslav like covers it up and then like immediately after he covers it up it's like so anyway like, like it's like it pretty much goes like it's like so we think the vampire and it's like hey, crucifix and like they cover it up. So anyway the vampire came out it's like
I had to
immediately
go
like without
back
like
because
breaking a beat they just go back into it and how the that's how the yeah that's how the entire movie is and it's just it never stops. It's just weirdly funny. It I like if you have not seen this movie go and see it. You're doing yourself a favor by seeing this movie. It's so hilarious and if you like The Office or like Parks and Rec or anything like that, you'll definitely
I will say I had
get
to go
into it. It's
back
so
at that
so
scene
funny.
because I didn't see the crucifix. I just saw the stakes, the wooden stakes, and so I'm like, are they just freaking out because they're seeing the stakes? Like just looking at
Yeah,
them hurts them. I don't get. I had to go back like 2 times, 2 or 3 times before I saw. Oh, there's a crucifix. That makes okay. and but then uh
yeah. And I think at one point they're like admiring like the stakes. Like, do you think like I think he sanded these. Like these are like really well polished. Like, oh yeah, that'll really kill you. It's
But
like
then
they're
shortly
admiring the
after,
murder
Nick stopped by
weapons.
because they heard like noise and thought there someone said they was worried there was a fire, and they're like, "Can we come in?" And Viaga's like, "Yeah." And of course they're down the basement, and there's still the vampire hunter just dead on the floor.
They like hit, oh and yeah, and they hypnotize the cops like you won't notice anything
Oh,
out of the
okay.
ordinary. It's like well certainly it's like oh well I certainly hope not. It's like I'm not the best at hypnotizing, so I don't know how long this will last. So, like I really hope that they won't notice anything out of the ordinary. And like every few minutes, like whoa, hang on a minute, it's like, what's that? Like, that's a fire hazard, mate, and you don't have any smoke detectors in here. It's like, oh, that's a good point. It's like, oh, we should kill them. It's like, no, they're actually making really good points. Like, let's see it,
That makes
whatever, like,
so
other
much
safety
more
features
sense.
they'll recommend. And it's just, that's the whole
No,
reason
I
they're
just
not
thought they
killing.
were like
That's the
because
whole.
okay,
You didn't
when the
realize
fire
that?
okay, so they're in the kitchen
Oh
now
my
and
god.
Nick and Deacon were fighting because obviously Nick's, just casual telling people that he's a vampire is what led to Peter dying. And so Deacon and him are fighting. Uh Nick's like flying in the corner of the
Yeah.
wall and Vlad is holding back Deacon who's also flying and the cops just come in and I'm like are they just no? I've hardly kind of thought it was just a joke, like they're just being really oblivious, or they don't realize what they're seeing, and then they're like, "Wait, what's that? Oh, there's no violence." I thought they were just being oblivious. I did
Oh
not
my.
know that they were
Oh my
hypnotized.
god.
That makes so much more sense.
Oh my god. That's so. I can't imagine watching that scene without
No, I thought
realizing
they
that
were
they were
just like
hypnotized.
I thought like,
That's
isn't it
so
so funny? They aren't seeing them like,
what the
and then when
hell?
they see the the hunter's just still dead on the ground. They're like, "Oh, he's drunk. Yeah, he's fine." And like, well, you just can't leave him there. I thought they were just being really crappy at their jobs. I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's oh my god. Yeah, that's
Um,
really crappy at their
but
job. That's what
speaking
they're
of them being
thinking.
hypnotized, so Vlad mentions
Oh
like
my
throughout the movie that
god.
like yeah we can hypnotize people, we can do whatever we want, and there's like there's parts whenever they're in bars, or there's even a part where he's standing outside this guy's house and just trying to stare at him, trying to get him to look at him, and then he like knocks on the door. He like
Yeah,
knocks.
it's like
He's
yeah, it's like yeah, he goes, "See me.
like, "Do you want to come
See
in?"
me." He smacks the window.
And yeah,
uh
this I think there's actually another. It's a really small joke, but I think we didn't talk about how you mentioned before how they can't see themselves in mirrors, and it's when Diago is picking up a cup to show the documentarians, and he's like, "Oh,
yeah.
is it a ghost cup? Oh, how is it flying? Oh," and then later when was it Nick or Stu? One of them is holding like a lemon, and the other is just holding like a cloth, so it looks like the Pac-Man and the Pac-Man ghost. I was like, I was just mainly just
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
the innocence, just the innocence of the whole. Like, oh, is it
Waka
a
waka waka
ghost?
waka waka waka.
Oh,
Yeah.
just Viago.
Yeah, it's I this movie is just there's so many just random funny scenes that I absolutely love. I also really love their like conversation of like them trying to like get like
Oh, Nick.
Stu and like
Mm-hmm.
Josephine like comfortable of like lulling them into like a false sense of security. Yeah, like, Nick. Yeah, sorry. Of like, oh, so are you two virgins? Like I don't know. And then like cut to like Nick in like a confessional. It's like, yeah, I just thought they were like really weird, like Europeans or something. Like I thought this was like kind of normal. Like they kind of weirded me out, but just don't want to be rude. But yeah, they were kind of dicks, so I had to get out of there. And it was just I thought that when I first watched this movie, I didn't know what to expect because Frank, our friend Frank, recommended this movie to me, and we all sat down and watched it together.
Yeah.
And
Yes, thank you.
thanks for the recommendation, Frank. This movie is just a blast. Yeah. Um, I I don't think I would have really known about this movie until the show on FX of the same name. I honestly don't think I would have really known about it unless I like really got into like Taika Waititi through like Thor Ragnarok and
So you
Jojo
don't watch
Rabbit,
the show.
which knowing me is entirely possible. But
Oh, okay.
I I don't have FX. I think it's on like Hulu, but I also don't have Hulu. I would definitely watch it if I had access to it, but as of right now, I do not. That might change in the
I've
next like month or so, but
I've been wanting
yeah,
to
as of right
watch it,
now,
but I'm like,
I
I
do
want to
not
watch the
have.
movie first,
I've not
and I'm
seen
glad
it.
I did. Um,
Yeah, well, I don't. Well,
yeah, but I
that's the
still
thing is
was
that I
like,
don't
I
know
wanted to
if
see
like
the.
it's its
Yeah,
own
but I still wanted
separate
to see like
group of
the
vampires. So I think it's
original
its own
thing
story.
first before I got into the. I don't know. I just like, yeah. But we should jump to the
Oh,
end,
okay.
which
That's fair. That's fair.
well, I will say one of my favorite things about this movie happens at the very,
Oh yeah,
very end.
the
But
party.
after the party, at the party actually they leave because Nick brought his plus one with him. Of course, it was Stu, and the beast was like, "That's a human," and
And
they're trying to
everyone
like,
wanted
"No,
to
you
eat him.
can't." They're all like, it's so cute. They're all just like surrounding him, like they don't want anyone to touch Stu. And then they're trying to get asked, they're like, "Stu, no, C's our friend. Like, tell him what you do." And he's explaining his job, which is like it's like software. Yeah, and he's explaining it,
It's
but
like
he's
a systems
explaining it just like
analysis or
so
something.
casually in the way that anyone would explain anything, as opposed to the fact that he's saying this
Like
to
their
try to
job.
convince all
Yeah.
these vampires why they shouldn't kill him. And then but this doesn't help because based on his job, just I guess is kind of nerdy and boring. So they're all like, oh, "He's a virgin guy." So and then Vlad shows up and fights the beast, and they end up all leaving, and they run into.
Yeah, after Stu basically like impales the like the Beast's new boyfriend, who
Oh
I don't know
yeah,
if
I
he was like
forgot
a
about that.
vampire or what, because he had like a bunch of like stuff on his face. But yeah, it was really funny. It's like, oh yeah, and like as they're leaving, like Vladislav is like talking to Stu, is like, yeah, we both beat that guy up equally.
But they
It's
run
like
into the
you didn't
werewolves,
do shit.
and
You got
oh
your
no,
ass
it's a
kicked.
full moon. And I have to
Um,
say, I thought it was so funny how they're
yes,
like, "Oh no, it's a full moon," and rather than just them, they're starting to transform. But rather than them just transforming, they're taking off their jackets, like just starting to, and
yeah, it's
the
like I don't want to
design.
rip
You
my
don't really
clothes.
get a good look at the werewolves. They kind of looks like, I don't know, what's they kind of from like a yeti, honestly, from far away, like
They're kind
a
of
little bit.
yeah, they're kind of shrouded in like the shadows and whatnot, which like that's fine, but like you see them enough to
No,
just
it
like
wasn't,
that looks
but
pretty
it
good.
wasn't
Like I
enough that
wasn't
I could
disappointed
really
with
judge
that.
them. Other than the way they were
Yeah,
walking, I thought looked kind of. Again, I don't know. I'm not a werewolf expert, so I don't know. But anyway, I mainly was just getting confused because the
yeah,
way it's shot, it's trying to be very chaotic. But I was getting mixed up on what was happening because at first, so one of the cameramen dies, which also they at the party when they were like, when they're making a joke
yeah.
trying to save Stu, like, what? No, you guys said plus one, you did not specify the plus one couldn't be a human, and then they all make note of the camera crew that's there. They're like, no, you're not killing the camera crew either. Like, leave them alone.
It's like you can't eat the cameraman. You like you might be able to eat one cameraman. Like Vladislav's like trying to negotiate with them. It's like you can eat one cameraman. Like the cameramen are like kind of like oh shit like
But
like
one
they're
of the
kind of freaking
camera
out.
people
Um,
dies, I
but yeah,
think, right? Yeah.
yeah, one of the cameramen just straight up gets like disemboweled and eviscerated, and unfortunately, Stu also gets jumped by like all of them. And Nick and like Deacon, like they've pretty much been like fighting like on and off this entire movie. And like Deacon sits down next to like Nick and is like has like a heart to heart, and it's like, you know what, I think this is what Nick, the what Stu would have wanted, being disemboweled by werewolves. I think it's what the way he would have wanted to go, and I know it really sucks being a werewolf or a vampire, because you get to see like all your friends like grow old and die and sick and just and then like after he says this, it does not really like help at all with him feeling better. It's like, I really
but
hope
I
this makes you feel better, and they like walk away, and like Nick's just like,
but I
ah,
have to
son of a
say
bitch,
that
that's the
line
best
is also kind
that
of
they're gonna
adds
do.
like a little bit of, you know, a little bit of realism to the whole thing, because yeah, they are vampires, and vampires have to watch people they know grow up and live their lives when they don't get to. So it was kind of like a little bit still within a joke, but it was this kind of very realistic, like, yeah, that is something that a vampire would deal with. But the thing about this whole scene is I had to go back because yeah, Deacon and Nick are like having their talk after Stu's demise and disembowelment, I guess, because yeah. Anyway,
Disembowelment.
jump ahead, and Stu is alive. How is this possible? And it shows like him being picked up by medics, and then him like moving and freaking out and like running away. And turns out he's a werewolf, and then kind of
Storming
just joins
off.
the pack. And they
And Stu's like, and Stu's kind of like been like kind of like the bridge to kind of like get these like this like pack of werewolves that like kind of like started fighting with like the vampires like earlier on in the movie. Like these guys like don't like each other, and he's like, since like the vampires like they love Stu, and like Stu's part of the pack, it's like, you know what, we'll do this for Stu, and they like invite them over and they hang out. It's like, you know, we couldn't really quite get used to the dog smell, but after we opened up a couple windows, it wasn't that bad. It's like, and they're like all like laughing and like hanging out and just being like the best of buds in like this like almost like haunted house like
but I
broken
have
down
to
looking manor.
but then they're basically
Like it,
having
it,
kind of
it
like a
looks like
party
shit.
um with the werewolves, and probably my one of my favorite moments of, one of my other favorite moments of the movie. Viago finally apparently made his move with Catherine, and actually like revealed himself to her and turned her into a vampire. Keep in mind, she's like 90 years old, and they're still just like in love and together, and
Yeah. And
oh,
oh, I I love the line that he says. Like, I was like, yeah, a lot of people are kind of like weirded out by the age difference. Like, what is this like 90-year-old woman doing with someone who's like four
that's that
times her
other line
age?
that I
Like,
thought was
I don't
like
care if they
really
call
like
me a cradle robber. It's
legit, like
whatever.
actual
It's
not
like,
legit, like
my
really
God.
God, what did I say earlier? Like how like I was talking about the bloody plates. Like it's another one of those jokes that's actually like uh
Just
what's the word? We can't think of the word. I said it
you take
earlier.
you take it one way, and it's they say something. I can't think of it either, but yeah, like they
No, the
multiple times they say
exactly
something
what
and
they're
you're
saying.
expecting one thing, and it turns out being like the exact opposite or something.
Literal.
Yeah, yeah,
There
like
we
you're
go.
expecting
Like
something,
I
but
said
it's
this
either
word early. It's a
like the
very
exact
normal word.
opposite, or it's
Anyway,
it's
but
it's
yeah, I
very
just love
literal. Yeah,
the reason I love this scene so much is because in every vampire anything, there's almost or most, I guess, I don't think it's really talked about in Lost Boys, but anyway, in almost any vampire anything, there's always the whole discussion of like, no, you can't be together because like the vampire's still gonna be a vampire and you're gonna get old and blah 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 and whatever. But and I just kind of love that like they're still they're a still in love, and then b he does not care that she's old, that he still like loves her, wants to be with her, and I just thought it was so adorable and sweet. But also the fact that she is really old and he's super young, and I kind of just love that. And he made her a vampire. So now she's a vampire and they can be together forever despite the fact that she's like 90. It's just so adorable and funny funny to me. I was just so it was not I was not expecting it at all. Um that's right at the end of the movie.
It was such
Yes.
a wholesome ending for this movie. Like Stu is live, like they're all best buds, like, and even Vlad and the Beast, like, I guess kind of got together and are like having like really aggressive, like angry sex. Is like, okay, I guess they're
Wait, was
like,
that in the
okay, good
I
for
don't
them.
wait, when was that? I don't
It was
remember
just
that.
okay. You apparently missed like everything in the mid
Oh,
credits then.
okay. I'm like, is there a whole other movie in the mid credits?
Go rewatch this and just rewatch. Yeah, like
You know what? I will. Apparently, they were worth checking out.
Marvel has apparently taught you nothing.
Because I'm like, I only do that for Marvel, and I think actually even Disney movies, I would not, I would forget to fast forward or not sit through, and then apparently I'll miss something, and I'm like, okay, just 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 maybe just do it with everything apparently now because I keep missing stuff.
Yeah,
I think
you
I
re-
missed a mid or post credit scene in Gooby. Like that's how bad it is.
yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
But can you blame me for wanting to turn the movie off?
I mean, I just fast forward. I at least see it.
So
All
yes,
right, so Sam, do you think this movie is real?
um, I think I'm gonna mainly. I think the biggest reason why I want to say no, I feel like there's a lot of things about this that I do find I kind of want to say are real, but I have to say no mainly because I feel like in actuality they would make an effort to adapt and dress like the modern world. Like they're not really making an
Yeah,
effort to adapt, which is part of the movie, the joke of the movie, and it's great. But I think in reality, I feel like I don't think that's how it would go. I think.
yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of with you. I don't think this movie would have happened the way it did. I don't think the. I think yeah, like the way they dress and like act, like they stand out in a crowd like extremely uh uh like obviously like there's something kind of off with these guys like I guess like their only defense is that like oh like we're European, we're like not used to this, like for the most part like it seems like they've been in New Zealand for like decades, uh like like they never like specify like how long, but I mean like they've at least been there for like at least like the 40s, so like I don't know, like 60 years, so like enough to know like this isn't how like people like dress or act. Is like that being said, I think that they either would have been found out that they are vampires way
Mm-hmm.
sooner before the events of this movie even happened, which I guess is how the documentary crew was able to get hold of them. So I guess that's a point for them for the movie. Um, but the fact that there is a documentary crew filming this very predatory species that like hunts down humans, I think that it's like, oh, like so the camera crew is going to either be killed like by the time this movie's over, or they're going to reveal the location of all these vampires and get all the vampires killed or something like that. So it's like one way or another, there's just going to be a lot of there's going to be a really high body count.
Oh my
So
god.
yeah, I don't think
Sorry, on
this. Yeah,
IMDb it says, and maybe this isn't true, but it says about 125 hours of footage was shot, and but most of it was just improv, and and
I can 100% believe that.
and it took about it took like a year to edit it down to like an hour and a half. Oh,
Oh my
good god.
god.
But yeah, kind of what you're. Sorry, I was I was looking up because I wanted to confirm. Like, so yeah, Taika Waititi is from there. He's New Zealand. What is it called? I don't know. He's not.
I I
Okay,
guess a New
yeah.
Zealander.
Okay, so
I
so
I
I
don't
didn't know
know.
if he was
I'm an American. You think I know anything
because I
that's
didn't know if he
international?
was Australian or New Zealand. I think I assumed during the movie like, oh, maybe he's not Australian, he's a New Zealander. I didn't. I don't know. Anyway, um, so I also that's another thing is I do think the location adds to the jokes as opposed to it being in like I mean, because wouldn't it have also been funny if let's say it's like modern day like so like okay Transylvania is kind of like Romania area. So if it was like a city in
Yeah,
Romania, it could have been that. But I mean, I'm assuming whether it was budget or just the major like the comedic decision, they picked New Zealand, which sounds like such a like that's not where you set a vampire movie, but it made it funnier because it's such a random location. Which I mean, again, they're from there, so it's not that random. But like for the context of the movie, it could have been anywhere. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I think I was thinking this movie wasn't. I'm assuming it's like it's an indie movie. It was in theaters, like somewhere, because
Yeah, like and like well, I know it. I'm not 100% sure if it did theaters, but I know it did like a bunch of
because Funny or Die,
like
right? That's what's on IMDb.
yeah, Funny or Die. Yeah, funny. Yeah, funny. Yeah, Funny or Die. I know it did a bunch of um festivals, like
Yeah,
film festivals and stuff like that. And that's kind of how it like gained momentum. And then I think it had like I don't know if it had like a theatrical release or if it just had a very limited theatrical release.
yeah.
But yeah, no, this movie's just so good. Like go and see it. It's so funny. Um,
It's not. Yeah,
this movie it exceeded my expectations because I was going into it thinking is like, oh, this is gonna be like Shaun of the Dead or something like that. Like there's gonna be like more horror than comedy because like vampires are like that's what they do. Like they're just like very manipulative like people eaters, and this one is just it's 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 more comedy than it is horror, and it's so funny. Definitely do yourself a favor and
it
give this a watch.
kind of said this in the beginning. It exceeded my expectations. I kind of went into it what how you had described it, and based on like quotes and stuff you had said, the whole like them dealing with being roommates and like uh kind of Peter's like their elderly roommate that they take care of. Just like there's these random very mundane jokes, and I was expecting that, but I wasn't. What I wasn't expecting was them like trying to get into bars or them dealing with or Viago's like the woman he can't be with or the fact that like or even like some they turned someone else into a vampire. I think there were things that a vampire would deal with that I was not expecting. I was thinking of it more of it just that mundane kind of humor. And so it exceeded my
Yeah,
expectations. Like it was what I expected, but it was also a little bit more than what I expected. Like I went, it had all the stuff that I knew it was going to have, and then it had more than that. And so I definitely recommend it. It's yeah, it's funny. If you love Taika Waititi, I'm assuming you've already seen it. Like, you know what I mean?
oh yeah, definitely.
Like it's like, and like, my God, he's so funny. He's so talented. He's such a good writer and director, and Jermaine Clements as well. Yeah, we both recommend it. We can't recommend it enough.
Seriously. Um, so yeah, with that being said, Sam, where can these lovely people find us and listen to our lovely sensual voices over
Did you
the
say
internets?
sensual voices? Okay.
Yes, where can they
No, I
find
mean, okay.
us?
I just wanted to clarify. Okay. So you can find us pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. So iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, um, Google, all that stuff. You can also find us on YouTube, and yeah, please stick around and keep listening to us as we're gonna keep talking vampires for rest of October. Um,
Yes.
I'm told next week. I think that next movie is apparently a 180 from this.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, this one it's like all comedy and very little horror. This
I
one,
would.
the next one is going to be all horror, and you're not the biggest fan when it comes to scary
Well, I
movies,
mean,
are you?
first of all, I wouldn't even say that this movie had any horror, to be honest. But yeah, yeah,
No, well, I mean, it's technically, I mean, it's still technically
yeah.
classified as a horror comedy.
Um,
So, like, yeah,
no, I mean, I like fun scary. I don't like, but then I like scary where it's like, okay, like last year, Black Christmas and Halloween were really fun, scary movies to watch. Um, but I don't know. Again, I don't watch enough horror to. I feel like I think I'm more scared of stuff than I am, just because I, in general, don't watch horror. But I don't
yeah.
know. I'm kind of. You were giving me an out, saying we could do something else, and I'm kind of want to just watch it.
Yeah,
You gave me an
I
out.
gave you an out.
I
I gave you an out. It's like,
I told my
so it's
roommates I'm
like,
not watching it alone though. That's
so
my
I guess,
only thing.
so with that being said, for all these people listening, are we going to pick the? Are we still doing the movie that I have
Yes.
scheduled for next week? Okay, you heard it here first, folks. Next week's episode is going to be the 2007 movie 30 Days of Night. Uh, with that being said, goodbye, everybody. I'm your host,
And
Kevin
I'm still
Tracy.
Samantha Tomlinson.
But have a good one, folks. Bye
Oh, this is Kevin in
bye.
What We Do in the Shadows accent. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, well. Eh, all right. Bye, everyone.